Welcome to this side event of the Sporting Chance Forum 2021, brought to you by the Center for Sport and Human Rights. One of the panels at this forum focuses on sex and gender in sports policy. You can see this session live on the 4th of October at 4 p.m. Geneva time, or at any time after the event using our online portal. For the panel itself, we're in the very capable hands of Madeleine Pape from the University of Lausanne. She's joined by Andreas Graf of FIFA, Magali Markowitz of the IOC, Kelekai Kayalo of the UN Human Rights Office, and Veronica Ivey, a trans athlete and human rights advocate. From all the sports bodies who are grappling with the issue of gender, we selected to hear from FIFA and the IOC because they've either made a statutory commitment to respect human rights, in the case of FIFA, or they've launched a strategic process to look to incorporate human rights, in the case of the IOC. In looking at the issue of gender in sport, we're not trying to say what the answers are. Rather, it's to note that historically, this conversation has been had without a human rights-based approach. But now the Human Rights Council at the UN is writing reports about it. The Office for the High Commissioner for Human Rights is engaged. So why has there been a mobilization from these actors around this issue? Because, although policies perhaps have been well-intentioned, harms have occurred. And when that happens, we have to examine why and look at how processes can be improved. So our approach is to be informative and educational for people who want to understand how to look at the issue of gender through a human rights lens, or using a human rights-based approach. And part of that is to ensure that the voices of those affected are heard. In an issue as complex as this one, that almost certainly means institutions will be hearing things that will challenge them. We also have to bear in mind how harmfully polarizing this topic has become, and to think about the right format for conversations to take place safely, particularly where there are power dynamics that are relevant or where there's a risk of re-traumatizing survivors of abuse. For that reason, we convene two side events that support the main panel discussion in order to listen to two groups of athletes directly affected by regulations in sport around sex and gender. These are sessions firstly on transgender athletes with our friends at Athlete Ally, and secondly on athletes with variations in sex characteristics with an expert who has worked closely with many athletes, Dr. Payoshni Mitra. These side events are intended to provide more context and specifically demonstrate the complexity of the issues at play and the lived experiences of those who have suffered harm through their involvement in sport. On that basis, let's dive into these sessions. For this event, I have the honor to interview Dr. Payoshni Mitra, athlete rights activist and director and trustee at the Center for Sport and Human Rights. I interviewed Dr. Mitra about the experience of women with variations in sex characteristics, also known as intersex, about their experiences in elite sport. During our conversation, Payoshni will bring parts of interviews she recently recorded with 3 athletes: Annet Negesa, former 800-meter runner from Uganda; Aminatou Seyni, who ran the 200-meter category at the Olympics in Tokyo; and Holali Ativor, a footballer from Ghana. These interviews were recorded in advance. Welcome, Payoshni.
Thank you so much, Mary, for the introduction. I am, really grateful that in this year's Sporting Chance conference, you have had you have the space for athletes and to listen to athletes who are impacted directly by these regulations. So thank you so much for that.
Before you start telling us about your experiences with the athletes you interviewed for this event, I wanted to first hear about your own experience working with female athletes with variations in sex characteristics. As an athlete rights activist, what drew you to focus on this particular group? Can you tell us more about your work with them?
I think I'll start with my own, career as an athlete. And there was a time when I wasn't experiencing things very positive in sport, and I decided to drop out. did feel, sort of abused, by my coach, especially severe verbal abuse, and I decided to drop out. So my entire, sort of post that, my entire life has been about ensuring, that sport is safe, that girls and women who tend to, sort of come to the field of sport are willing, to stay back, are feeling, welcome, and are safe in the whole process, So I look at it from a dropout's point of view, and therefore I believe the work that I ended up doing in the last 11 years have been with athletes who sort of were either banned or had to drop out, or sort of gradually, as they say, disappeared from the circuit, after undergoing some form of surgery, as we will see later when you will show some of the videos we have done in recent past. So it was from the point of view of an athlete who dropped out. So you can say it was the reason why ended up doing this work was because I myself was a dropout in sport. The first athlete I worked with was Shanti Soundarajan, who was banned from sport in 2006 after failing a so-called sex verification test in 2006 Doha Asian Games. And my beginning was in 2010, around the same time when Caster Semenya makes a comeback after 10 months of being banned from sport after the Berlin World Championships. So I went to see Shanti Soundarajan, and we started working together to reach out to the federation nationally, the Olympic Committee, the ministry, to help her. She did not even get the medical certificate, the medical documents from the tests. So that was the first thing we tried to do. And then I ended up getting involved in other athletes' cases in India. And eventually Duti Chand's case happened, which is quite well known. And we challenged the hyperandrogenism regulations of the then International Association for Athletics Federations in 2014 at the Court of Arbitration for Sport. And we got a favorable decision. So for the first time, all of us realized that the fact that regulations should be based on science wasn't really correct, because the court felt that there was not enough scientific evidence to back the regulations they had brought into practice about 4 years before that judgment was given. And then on, with Castor and everyone, the work just went on.
I'm sure each athlete you work with has their own unique perspective and what they had to go through in their experience. But would you say there's a common thread or a common narrative that most of these women with variations in sex characteristics ended up experiencing in sport?
So I agree with you. Maybe there is a common narrative. There are differences as well, given that all these women come from different cultures. But there are quite a few common, sort of experiences as well. One of the things I would say is the same as even for me, that you come to sport to enjoy sport, to get some kind of a positive experience through sport. But then while you are sort of, you feel that you will feel more included in the field of sport, more, it's safer in the field of sport. Sport sort of embraces everyone. That's the idea we generally have about sport. And most of these women came to the field of sport just because of that, but ended up feeling in some way inadequate, in some way not woman enough. And this we see in case of Holali Ativor's story, who's a footballer from Ghana. And I would suggest that, we listen to her directly about what she experienced when she came to play football.
I started playing football from 12 years. I was playing for my school team. I even take like a trophy for them. So even the school was happy for me. but they don't know like I was intersex. So when like I was going to the senior high, that's the where the case was coming. Some people say like I'm not a girl, I'm not a boy. So that place I was very sad. So I tell my mom that I want to stop the school because of that. And I went to Kumasi Sports Academy for almost 5 years. I was playing. So I was, if it was like a school plus the football team. So if they are going to bath, like all of them, they are going to bath. Sometimes I don't bath. Sometimes I don't bath because I don't want anyone to see the same problem I'm facing from the childhood. So later they call me for the national team before all of them hear it. So from the national team, and they say like how I was playing, I'm not playing like a female because I'm playing higher, more down, some of the female over there. So they said they must go and check me. And that time I was afraid to say like I'm an intersex. So I went. So they asked me, are you a female or me? And I said, like I'm a female. And they said no, because how I look don't look like someone is female. So that is the place they dropped me because I was intersex. And they did physical examination. So after that, she told me I should go and do surgery before I can play for the national team. So when I come back home and I went to a hospital and I was treating it, but nothing good coming from it.
There's been an increasing number of female athletes speaking out about their experiences. What roles have they been playing for other women and girls in their countries and continents when they do so?
We can't be grateful enough to Duti Chand for taking the stance she did in 2014 as an 18-year-old, Indian athlete. We can't be thankful enough to Caster Semenya for how resilient she has been, even after enduring so much of scrutiny for 10, 11 years in international sport. And we can't be thankful enough to Annet Negesa as well for what she has done recently. She was I can't believe how courageous all these women have been to sort of come out and talk about their stories in public and make sure that other young women and other young athletes who are experiencing similar issues in sport could feel more confident and don't feel alone. And I would say that some of these athletes like Duti Chand, like Annet Negesa, who I have closely worked with, they have always been a big support in connecting with others. I've often put them in touch with some younger athletes who they have been able to speak to and advise. And it does make a different kind of, it does have a different kind of impact if an athlete, a former athlete is talking to an athlete saying, I've gone through this myself. And it happened in case of Holali Ativor as well, because I put Annet Negesa in touch with Holali Ativor when she was in this situation where she told me that I really don't want to do this surgery, but I feel like I'll have to do it if I continue to play football. So she was feeling compelled to take steps, medical steps, just because she wanted to play football. And that is what our national federation was saying, even though it's true that FIFA's current regulations, however problematic they are, do not really suggest any medical steps. But the national federation was saying that, and Holali was under tremendous pressure, but it really helped her when she spoke to Annet.
Women have been clearly affected by eligibility regulations in different types of sport. You just mentioned football and athletics as examples where this has happened. In 2020, in her report to the Human Rights Council on the intersection of race and gender discrimination in sport, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Dr. Michelle Bachelet, noted that the sport of athletics eligibility requirements contravene women's athletes' rights in a variety of fundamental ways. So how have athletes affected sought remedy? What kind of support and redress have they been able to achieve thus far?
It's been quite a difficult process for us at the time when I was involved in Dutee Chand's case, along with several, advocates across the world, and I would like to name Bruce Kidd from Canada and Katrina Karkazis from the US, and also the legal team in Canada, consisting of Jim Bunting and Carlos Sayo. I think when we were working with Dutee Chand's case as well, we realized we didn't know where to go. And then finally, we thought we should go to Court of Arbitration for Sport. And to get that amount of money, to be able to go to Court of Arbitration for Sport, to even give, sort of pay for the initial court fee, I felt like it wasn't something that an 18-year-old Indian athlete could have done if we had not got the support from the government. And Indian government did provide that supporting cost, and the lawyers came in pro bono. So it was possible to go ahead with that. In most cases, athletes are not even aware of their rights. They are not even aware that these regulations could be challenged. A lot of athletes told me that when they heard in 2015 that the regulations were suspended, many athletes in Africa, senior athletes, they said, we never knew there was a way to challenge that regulations. When we were told that these are sport rules, we thought we'll have to follow no matter what. And this happens even in case of, Annet Negesa. She felt like she had no other choice, and she goes ahead with whatever the National Federation and the International Federation together suggested her to do. She says that she felt trapped. And it has been in a way disappeared, they said, from the circuit for 7 years. And now since 2012, it has been so many years, and she has never been able to come to sport and never really got justice.
When I went back for preparation for the London Olympics, some few weeks to the departure, so I received a call from my international manager, calling me, telling me that, you know what, you are not going for the Olympics. And he gave me the reasons to why. He told me they disqualified you because when they did the tests in your blood, they found that you have a high level of testosterone in your body or blood samples. So it was really a hard time. In along with the contacting with the IWF doctor and also my international manager. So they had to direct me to go to Nice, whereby my local manager got for me a ticket and gave me everything like the election. Later in the morning, the following day, the international manager came. I went together to the hospital for more assessment in the University of Nice hospital. They were speaking in French, they were not speaking English. Right? When I came back to Uganda, they had to do more assessments, like more checkups or the body, like small scans, as well as doing very many consultations in the hospital. For sure, I had no idea by the time. What they were telling me, they were just telling me, you're gonna be okay, you're gonna be okay. The procedure which we agree like for using injections or pulling out the tests from the body, that's what we agreed on. And when I wake up in the morning, I found I have cuts under my belly, and really I was wondering, and I was so shocked, asking myself really what happened to me. I felt my body was very weak. Also, I got some side effects like getting strong headache, getting also my joints paining, also all my joints, and really the body was really totally weak and too much depression. They been told me that I'll be taking homeotherapy throughout my life, and really I didn't know that I had to take like medication like throughout the entire life of mine. So I didn't know that. I just knew that when they are already done and given me antibiotics and everything is done. yeah, really, if I had enough idea about that issue, and if I had someone to consult to, and if I had someone who can talk to me and tell me that this one is like this and this, really, I couldn't go for such. No one tried to look for me. No one tried to contact for me, or so I was just on my own by that time. And as I tried to do some training, because I got what they told me that I'll be back on sport. So I put it in my mind that, you never know. Either next month I'll be okay, either next month, like that. And really, which has taken for me now, it's almost now going to 10 years. They'll now focus on coming back to the sport.
We've looked at two very different sports. One is football and one's athletics. And we all know that from sport to sport, it can vary significantly. Yet when one sport makes regulations, even if these sports are perhaps different from other sports, does it have an impact if one sport makes a regulation on other sports who maybe have yet to make regulations or are simply trying to understand how to address these same issues? What's the impact of that?
My work with national federations, tells me that there is a lot of scope for, violation of athletes' rights at the national level. And I would say that the international federations make a rule, but they don't always communicate the changes in the rules very well to the national federations. And we have also noticed, in this case, you have seen one athlete and one footballer. We've also noticed, because athletics always had these regulations, other sports officials from other sports tend to sort of borrow ideas from how athletics govern such cases. So what they do is this kind of replicate in their sport the same kind of procedures or sort of actions that they have seen the National Athletic Federation do. So there is a lot of ripple effect of these regulations, and I feel like, and I have seen this in case of Ativor Holali, where there were sort of these notions in the head of the coach and the doctor that they need to ask her to do a surgery, which is not what FIFA says. You would also see other kinds of things. For example, in Duti Chand's case, Athletics Federation of India first did a test on Duti Chand, of which they had not kept any papers, but they accepted later in Duti Chand's hearing in CAS that they did some secret tests, which they were not supposed to do. Now, the current DSG regulations of the World Athletics says that national federations don't really actively need to investigate. But the fact that they still have these rules, that kind of, in a way, sanctions national federations to do something about it, because they feel compelled that if there is a rule, we can't really send an athlete to an international meet who has high level of testosterone. So they do still actively investigate no matter what. I have also seen another thing, Mary, and that's the lack of communication. I think it's so important for these international federations. I don't agree with these regulations, you know that. I strongly believe that these regulations should be revoked. But even if these regulations are there as it is at this moment, I feel there's a lot more that these international federations could have done. They could have communicated the changes in the regulations better to the national federations. It's a very confusing regulation. What happened in another athlete's case in Niger, I'm talking about Aminatou Seyni, who was a 400 meters runner and was banned from it, and she continued to run in 200 meters. She had qualification for both races in the Olympics, but her national federation, her national ministry could not understand why the same athlete is woman enough for 200 meters, but not woman enough for 400 meters. So they were confused and they didn't want to send her to the Olympics. And there was no French regulations. You would expect World Athletics to have the same regulations in English, French, and other languages so that it's more accessible to all different countries where athletes are impacted, but they did not have that. So it was even tougher for the National Federation to understand when I along with one of my allies, PJ Vazel, who's an international coach, we intervened. And that is where at least these are small steps that they could do to ensure that athletes do not face humiliation and scrutiny at the national level.
Yes, I was preparing to go to London, and I was actually already at the airport to leave, but I wasn't able to go. I was forbidden to run for 4 weeks. I wasn't able to run my best distance anymore because the regulations forbade that. So I couldn't run my 400 meters anymore. I went back to Niger and I decided to compete on the 100 meters and 200 meters. But before that decision, I was angry. I was angry with this regulation from the IAAF. My goal was to qualify for the 2020 Olympic Games. And in Doha, I felt comfortable that I was able to do this on the 200 meters. And I did qualify. So I'm going to continue with the 200 meters and I progressed on that. And that is what I'm going to focus on for the rest of my career. God made me this way and I'm going to stay this way. And others don't have anything to do with that. If they want to talk about that, that is nothing to me. That doesn't really have any meaning. I am who I am and I work hard to win in the competitions.
Now, Payoshni, you've pointed out that regulations in sport target specific groups of women, particularly brown and black women from the global south. Can you elaborate what you mean by that?
It's not us saying, Mary, that it's not the advocates against these regulations who are saying that these regulations are disproportionately impacting athletes from the global south. But if you look at interviews of even former medical commission members of the World Athletics or the IOC, for example, Martin Ridson, you will see that they have also said the same thing, that more athletes from the global south are being investigated. These are publicly available interviews. So this is the truth. If you go back to the 2013 Fenichel paper, which was something that we talked about in both cases, Duti Chand as well as Caster Semenya cases, and both in that paper is something that tells you what was happening in the background. So 2011, the hyperandrogenism regulations came into being, and then 2014, Duti Chand challenges it, and then you see it being suspended in 2015. But during those years, World Athletics was silently, because there is this confidentiality protocol, obviously, they need to keep all these cases confidential. They were sort of investigating athletes and making them take medical steps. The Fenichel paper tells you that there were 4 athletes from rural and mountainous regions of countries with poor care. In another place, and I'm quoting from this paper. And in another place, they say rural and mountainous regions of developing countries. So these peer-reviewed articles written by scientists who were either associated to the IAAF or part of their advisory committees, a very paper written by these scientists admitted that these athletes, 4 of them about which this paper was written, were all from developing countries. So it's not us saying that this has been disproportionately targeting athletes from the global south. There is ample proof from the very people who have been doing this that these regulations have been impacting athletes from the global south.
And what has participation in sport meant to these women?
I think I would not say much about that, because I believe the interviews that we have done recently with Aminatou, with Annet, with Holali, I think those their words say how important it is, how important sport is in your life and in my life, that we ended up working in the field of sport all our lives. You were a champion athlete, I wasn't, but for both of us, sport was so important that we ended up working in the field of sport. And I think it's best suited that you hear it from these very athletes who have suffered so much humiliation in the field of sport and yet love sport.
Like that is the talent I have from the childhood I was born. So I really love football. I see football like a happiness, and like, how can I say it? Like, it's my happiness talent thing I have. Apart from football, I don't have any talent again. So that make me to polish it to the high level, so that I should approve the talent that God have given to me. They should help me whether to get like a contact to the national team or even the league, or to get somewhere, whether to leave the country or some team to play where I should be comfortable there without any problem.
So my mom just received the news that your child, what she's doing on the track, you have to go and see. So my mother was wondering, and really she was very happy. And she never knew that I could be doing very great in running. So she was very proud. And that's the time when I started succeeding. There and then I got a scholarship from the school. So I started from there as I continued up. It was very important for me because my family wasn't really in a good stable of like paying school fees. So I think it was like a chance or like a miracle which came across. So it was really very, very important. So that also on the side of the parents, it gives also them time, a breathing space, also to focus on other things, because I was one supporting the family and also myself, also supporting my young sisters and brothers, whereby when that issue happened, really, I became again a burden to the family. First of all, it's really important people to know what really in the which is to know which is really taking place behind what they call that regulation in the sport. Sports is a game which connects to people, but now they are bringing in like racism and discrimination in the sport. So what I can say about the regulations, I think is something which is now they need now to run it out and just leave people to be as they are.
So I said, yes, I want to be a great athlete for Niger, for Africa, and for the world. And I would like to be of assistance for other athletes and to represent African athletes, but also be of assistance on a world level. My dream is also to coach and help other athletes.
Sport is clearly only taking its first concrete steps when it comes to taking the respect for human rights as part of their responsibility. But when you recently talked to the Diversity Conference of the Enlarged Partial Agreement on Sport for the Council of Europe, you shared some good practice. What do you think the next steps are for sports bodies to respect and promote the rights of women athletes with variations in sex characteristics?
Because of my work in the last decade or a bit more, I would say that, emphasize inclusion of women with variations in sex characteristics, and sort of would love to focus on this area. But I think it's also the larger goal of adopting human rights framework in their work, which you so wonderfully championed through the center's work. I think that is extremely important. And once sport bodies understand that they need to adopt human rights principles and they need to be more responsible the way they are governing sport, I think these changes will also follow. Having said that, I feel there has been some recent initiative by the IOC. As far as diversity and inclusion is concerned, they have been talking about it now openly, their stakeholder consultation. I feel like there is some hope that that medical lens, which was a very narrow lens for decades, as far as this issue was concerned, is slightly now sort of in a very unstable situation, and people are finally agreeing to look at it from a human rights perspective. And I think that's a huge step. The fact that IOC is openly saying that inclusion will be a priority is important. And I hope, like in other cases, IOC has given leadership to different things. I would hope in this case, they will end up giving leadership to this whole movement for inclusion, because sport is for everyone. And at every level, it should be for everyone.
What a beautiful way and optimistic way to conclude this session. Thank you very much, Payoshni, for this inspiring conversation. And please thank Annet, Holali, and Aminatou for sharing their stories and their very important insights with us.
Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you for making it possible as well, because it's really difficult often to reach several of these athletes who are in situations where it's not easy to connect with, also because of internet issues. And we have been able to sort of ensure that we are still able to connect. And thank you for helping us do that.
That's the end of the session, but please carry on the conversation on the Sporting Chance Forum 2021 website and on social media using the hashtag SCF21. I also encourage you to watch the session organized by Athlete Ally with transgendered athletes on sport regulations, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing all of you live at the session, Sex and Gender in Sports Policy, a Human Rights Perspective, on the 4th of October at 1600 CET. See you all then.